What conversation or interaction with a physically normal stranger left you wondering if you just talked to something non-human or supernatural, like an angel, demon, ghost, alien, time traveler, etc.? It was raining one day, and my husband and I decided to go to the car wash to vacuum the inside of my car. On the way, my husband expressed how much he was craving ice cream, so we planned to stop by Dairy Queen afterward. At the car wash, a man walked up to us and gave us a full bottle of glass cleaner. We didn't ask for it, he just came and gave it to us. Another man gave my husband a thumbs up while I was vacuuming, so he replied with a thumbs up too. This man then walked over to my husband, handed him $20, and told him to go buy himself some ice cream. We didn't know this man, and we didn't even interact with him besides the thumbs up from far away. My husband didn't even know why he gave him a thumbs up, but we won't ever forget this day. I was security for a blood test place during COVID-19, so I had to make sure I knew how many people went in and how many people came out. It was a couple of hours until closing time, and a short old man with a long white beard walked to the door, but he approached me instead and started talking about Jesus for almost 2 hours. He even cried while talking about it. After some time went by and there were only 10 minutes until we closed the shop, he said to keep my faith strong and never give up, and eventually said, "I better head inside now." I just nodded and thought the workers inside would send him away because by then, we only had about 6 minutes left until closing. 6 minutes went by, and the man had not come out. The ladies then turned the lights off, closed the shop, and left, not sure where the man went because he never came back out. I had moved to a big city for the first time after my mom passed away to get away from memories, I suppose. I had a horrible ex who was abusive, but we had broken up before she passed. He was close to my family, and he invited me over to talk about how I was doing after my mom's passing. One thing led to another, and we got into a huge fight. He was narcissistic and played the victim so well. He physically beat me up badly, and I grabbed a console of his and hit him on the head, causing him to bleed a little. When the cops showed up, who did they arrest? Bingo. My sorry ass. I had never been arrested in my life, and he had assault charges on him from me and his exes, but they arrested me because my bruises on my face weren't showing yet. They ended up showing up the next day in the holding cell, the ugliest bruises I ever saw on myself, being anemic like every girl usually is. Anyway, I stayed in holding for almost 2 days in my scrubs. I was with girls who were coming off drugs, sex workers, and people who stole. And me, in there for trying to defend myself. I got along with everyone since I'm normally nice and not judgmental. Also, my mania was showing, so no one messed with me because they said I looked crazy, but only because I had bad anxiety and was worried about how I was going to get home. I called my friend. She was leaving town but had a man post bail for me that she knew, and they let me out right before I was going to go to county. She just called him, and he came and helped. I was grateful. I didn't have a phone, money, or shoelaces. It's a huge city, and I was downtown with an apartment on the northeast side of town. That's a whole 20 to 30 miles, and I had work around 11 a.m. I got out at 3 a.m. It was 30 to 40 degrees. I only had thin scrubs, no jacket, phone, or money. I had to wait to get it until the next business day. I was upset. As soon as I walked out, I stepped down the steps and thought, let me follow this main road, and I will eventually get led to the north. So as I'm walking, a homeless man comes up to me and offers me a cigarette. I said sure. I don't smoke, but I was cold and stressed. I told him about being let out and stuff. He took off his super worn down leather jacket and gave it to me, telling me to be careful and God bless. I thought it was so sweet. I thanked him so much and continued walking. I went down a main road and stayed close to the freeway. It was 3 a.m. I walked about 5 miles and then I saw bus stops. I had no money, so I read the directions on every bus stop and just followed them until I got close to the street I worked on, since my job was 2 miles from my apartment. I walked, cried, walked to a nearby gas station, noticed I went north of the street I was supposed to and not south, cried some more, and continued walking. My legs were shaking. I was exhausted, hadn't slept or eaten in days. I was so tired and wanted to just lay down and give up. I finally reached close to a bus stop about 3 miles from my apartment. It was 11 a.m. I had been walking since 3 a.m. following bus stops. I met a man with a cross tattooed on his forehead. He asked me for a street close by, and I told him. He walked with me for a bit and told me he was getting a job and had given his life to God, turning his life around after just getting out of prison. I smiled and just kept walking with him, trying to get home. He thanked me, prayed for me, and gave me 2 protein bars from his backpack and a frozen lasagna. I laughed and said thank you so much. I just accepted it. I finally got home, took a shower, and walked to work since my car was still at my ex's house. I literally had sore legs for almost 2 weeks and bruises all over my face from my ex and feet from the walking. My muscles were so swollen, but I still went to work and pulled a 12-hour shift, then went back home and slept for almost 2 days. I just don't know how I even survived that night. I'm a girl, I had just turned 21, and I was hearing stories in jail of sex workers being killed near the freeway I was walking by, so I was just so scared. But meeting those 2 nice people along the way who helped me really just let me know I was going to be okay. At the restaurant I used to work at, there was this elderly woman who came in every Sunday, right at 11 a.m. She ordered the same thing, always sat by herself, was mostly quiet, and always tipped the same amount. Her bill came out to about $11, and she always left $13.55. Anyway, she was on a first-name basis with most of us, and one weekend I got her in my section. She normally didn't talk much, but that day she kept asking me questions and making odd comments. She kept bringing up my grandparents and would say stuff like, "Oh, I bet they're just so proud of you. Make sure you thank them and tell them you love them." Fairly typical for elderly people, I guess. Well, towards the end of her meal, she would not stop talking about my necklace. It was a gold chain with a crucifix on it that my grandma got me when I was 14. She passed away shortly after that. You couldn't even really see it. I had a collared shirt with a tie on, so I guess she saw it when I bent over, but I pulled it out so she could get a good look. She grabbed it and yanked it towards her and told me that as long as I wear that, my grandma is still watching over me. I didn't really know what to say and just assumed she was feeling especially lonely that day, so I played along. She left, and I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. I worked a double that day and didn't head home until about 10 p.m. I stopped at a gas station to get a couple of things, and crazy enough, my total came out to $13.55. I laughed and paid with a $20 bill. The cashier then told me to wait a moment because she had to go get change. As I was waiting, maybe 30 seconds or so, someone got absolutely hit as they were pulling out of the parking lot by this huge lifted truck. We called 911 and checked on the drivers to make sure they were okay. Thankfully, the guy that got hit was in a Yukon. He was hurt badly but was taken to the hospital and survived. Now, if that was me, on the other hand, I probably would have been killed in my tiny Saturn, and I probably would have been pulling out at that exact time had the cashier not needed change. I know. All this could just be a coincidence, but wait, there's more. The next weekend, the woman didn't show up at the restaurant. We were all a little concerned but had no way of contacting her or her family. The next weekend, same thing. Then, on a random day, when I happened to be standing at the hostess station, a woman came in and told us that her mother had passed and she wanted to let us know since she knew she came in every week. We all gave our condolences, and she noticed my name tag and said, "Oh, she told me about you. She said to tell you to always wear your cross." I'm not super religious or anything, but my grandmother was. So I don't know what to really call the lady, guardian angel or what have you, but it always felt like more than just a chance encounter. I still wear the necklace every day, nearly 20 years after my grandmother gave it to me. Superstition? Maybe. All I know is that there have been a few days I forgot to put it on. I take it off when I get into bed, and those days were miserable. It just seems like everything goes wrong if I don't have it on. So yeah, call it whatever you want, but I still think about what that lady told me all the time. This story is hard to explain, but I still get shivers when I think of it. He was a customer I was helping out. Honestly, there was nothing that really stood out with him. He was handsome, but in a normal way. He dressed normally, talked normally, was blandly friendly, as you are with strangers. Just a normal upper middle class type guy. The only thing that really stood out was his blue eyes. Not in a goofy supernatural type way, he just had very, very blue eyes. But for some reason, he made every hair on my neck stand on end. Alarm bells were going off in my head like crazy. All I wanted to do was hide. I have never felt this way, before or since. Even when I was followed home by someone, I have never felt such gut deep, "You are in danger," as I did with this guy. After ringing him through, he reached out to shake my hand. This is not common at all here, but out of politeness, I took it and shook. And I instantly got so nauseous I almost gagged. The moment I got nauseous, he just held my hand and smiled, and something in that smile made me absolutely sure he knew what I was feeling and he enjoyed it. I'm not religious in any way, but I remember thinking in that moment, "Oh fuck, is this the devil?" After he left, I was still so sick feeling I had to go to the back and sit down. I'm not sure if he was a serial killer or what, but to this day I have never experienced something even close to that encounter. I absolutely felt bone-deep certainty that I was in some sort of danger. I felt every bit the prey. It's a hard story to explain because it's all based on feelings, so I haven't told that many people about it. But to this day, it is absolutely one of the scariest and weirdest things I have experienced. In the most improbable of settings, I'm sitting at the symphony listening to a wonderful concert with my guy, and this couple takes the two empty seats next to him. Pretty much center seats. A few minutes pass, and I start to feel something weird, and it's coming from their direction. So I look across my guy and sneak a peek. Right away, I can tell something is wrong. They do not look right. They are both too big, and I do not mean fat. They both are equally too large. Hands, limbs, everything looks like they have been symmetrically pumped up and enlarged a few inches with a tire inflator. I look away because I think I am seeing things and try to pay attention to the music. Then comes the smell. And that is even worse. They do not smell human. At all. It is something else, and it feels like both a smell and a force or sensation. It is kind of electrical but not really. Now I am getting alarmed and look at my guy for reassurance. That is when the hair on my neck stands up because he is clearly just as alarmed. He sees the look on my face and says very quietly, "What the hell is next to me?" I am like, "I do not know." He says, "Can you smell that?" I nod. Then he says, "They do not smell human," and I am now pretty much freaking out. In the middle of the symphony, we are both getting more and more uncomfortable, not able to sit still because of whatever the hell is right there, and he says, "I think we might need to leave, I cannot take this," and I have to agree with him. We do not even know what it is that we cannot take, but being next to these things felt terrible. The few times I do try to look over at them again to see if I am somehow mistaken. No. They are too large, they are emitting this bizarro force field sensation of their own, and they do not even smell right. And what are they doing at a classical music concert? It is too much. So we are getting ready to move seats or leave entirely, and suddenly it is intermission. The things get up and leave. We are sitting there paralyzed. Once they are gone, the sensation of intense discomfort goes too, so does the smell and the feeling of disturbance and force field. Even stranger, we cannot seem to talk about it. All we could say is that at that moment we felt better. When I was in my teens, I attended an event where I was more or less unsupervised. I was hanging out in the venue, waiting for the event to start. There was a pretty good-sized crowd, a couple of thousand people, most of them in small groups. As I was waiting, people watching, I noticed this guy walking around in the crowd. No one was really looking at him, but they were getting out of his way as he walked, instead of the other way around. And as I was noticing this and thinking how odd it was, suddenly he looked over at me. Then he came over, with the crowd parting around him, but not paying any attention to him, and talked to me for a bit. Here's where it gets really strange. I don't really know what we talked about, and I don't really know what he looked like. I remember he was male, taller than me, no great feet, and I think he had dark hair, kind of longish. I think I specifically remember his hair because I was actively trying to remember something about him, so I was concentrating on what his hair looked like, to see if I even could remember it. And I think he noticed somehow, because in the middle of our conversation, he said something like, "Don't do that." Not in a menacing way, but just as a casual, "You're being rude" comment. And I think we may have gone somewhere briefly, because I have a vague sense of being somewhere away from the crowd, although I don't know where, and I don't remember going anywhere with him or coming back. There's no big payoff to this story. At some point, I was just alone again. I went to the event, had a good time, and at some point after I was home, I noticed I had a pretty good-sized scratch on my arm. It didn't look like something you'd get scraping up against a nail or playing with a dog. It looked more like an incision, not long, fairly deep. It didn't hurt unless I noticed it, and it was hard to notice it. I feel like it must have healed pretty quickly, or else I just didn't notice it healing. I had a scar for a few years, but not anymore. In my mind, the man and the scratch are linked, but I don't actually know if they are or what any of that was really about, but I've always kind of low-key wondered if I met a vampire that night. Okay, so this was not with lizard people or aliens in disguise or anything like that, but my whole experience was still freaky as fuck, and happened to me and a former friend I used to work with as we were standing in a group waiting to clock in for our shifts at Walmart. So, my friend is already at the clock, and I walk up with my lunch bag. There are about 5 other people there already, including a coworker from my department. I bend down to put my keys in my bag and hear the voice of someone that I did not like, and thought to myself, there's so-and-so with her beady little eyes and whiny voice. A little backstory here. My friend and I had this wicked telepathic link we discovered that we shared about a year before when we started working there. So on this day, while I was digging around in my bag, not making eye contact or looking at anyone, so I was unable to give any visual cues or hints or anything like that, plus I was not speaking at the time, my friend stops talking mid-sentence with another person and starts saying out loud to me like she is confused as to where this thought came from, verbatim what my thoughts were at the time, beady, little, eyes. Verbatim. It was the freakiest thing I have ever experienced. I said, "You heard that? That is what I was just thinking." Exact words. She says to me, "Yeah, it sounded like you were shouting." Even my coworker in my department who was waiting at the clock commented, "You guys are freaking me out." That was not the only experience I had with her like that. She married a guy from Edinburgh, United Kingdom, and moved away, but I have never experienced anything as intense as that since. About 12 years ago, my friends and I were driving from Los Angeles to Las Vegas to meet up with a friend whose band was playing a show there. We stopped at In-N-Out halfway there to grab a bite. As we sat down, we immediately noticed 2 men who stood out like sore thumbs. They looked middle-aged, average height and build, but were bordering on albino and had stark white hair. They also had thick sweaters and pants on despite it being over 100 degrees outside. They spoke a foreign language that none of us could place. The kicker, however, was when they began to eat. They had no frame of reference for how to eat a hamburger. They looked confused, and one held the burger up to his mouth vertically, biting into the bottom bun first. It was bizarre, and we still recollect on our alien encounter, occasionally. I had a 7-hour drive back to where I live. I was about an hour into my drive, and there was a horrible accident that happened about 7 seconds in front of my car. Unfortunately, a small child was ejected from a car, and he passed away and was lying on the street. I was stuck at the accident site for about 4 hours. I watched the police and paramedics come over, cover him with a sheet, and take him away. It was absolutely heartbreaking to watch. I was sitting in my car, crying my eyes out. I had no idea how I was going to continue my drive after how shaken I was from what I saw. And I could not believe that a matter of seconds could have saved my life from this accident. There were lots of people around because traffic was stopped for so long. I had been there for a while, and a man appeared at my window that I had not seen anywhere around. I cannot totally explain it, but everything about the way he looked and how he was dressed made me feel comfortable talking to him. I did not really want to speak to anyone in that moment, but I lowered my window, and he asked me if I was okay because he had seen me crying. I spoke to him for a long time. He was wearing a hat that said, "Army Veteran," and I told him about my dad, an Army veteran, who had passed away 4 years earlier, and he told me about his service. It was a strangely deep, meaningful conversation with a stranger, and he completely calmed me down. I was having a hard time at work, and he was telling me I had so much more to offer and to follow my passion. I had a project I was just starting to work on, and he actually inspired me to follow through and do it. He told me he felt as though God sent him to speak to me that day. He also said, if you met God, if you spoke to God, and you told your friends, would they believe you? It absolutely gave me the chills. When the accident was finally clear, we said goodbye, and he walked away, and I swear he just disappeared. I do not know who I talked to that day. He was definitely an angel. Or God. I do not know. But I will never forget it. I am in the Air Force Reserve, and earlier this year I was on base for drill weekend. The process for me to get into the military was long and stressful due to my previous medical history, but it was something I wanted to do more than anything, and eventually, I was accepted after 8 months. It was my first drill weekend, and I was leaving the hotel to report to my unit at 5:30 a.m. As I was walking out of the hotel, a military police officer was about to walk in. He was in his late 30s or early 40s, someone I can guarantee I had never met in my life. I looked at him and smiled, and he said, "Have a great day." I said, "Thank you, likewise sir," and continued walking a few more steps before he continued with saying, "You know, you are doing great, I am proud of you, honey, and I love you like my daughter. You're going to have an amazing day, I love you, and I'm proud." I was shocked and just smiled and said, "Thank you sir," and kept walking while tearing up. I had a surreal, floating kind of feeling and couldn't believe what he had said. My father passed away 6 years ago and had always called me honey. I immediately knew it was my dad talking through him somehow. I wonder if the man knew what he had said and why, and how much it had meant to me. I regret not going and giving him a hug and thanking him. I still think about it every day. My wife and I tried for years to have a baby. I travel for a living, so I see a lot of different cities. I was in Dallas, Texas, and stopped for gas and a bite. This young woman was sitting in her car with 3 kids and was crying her eyes out. I reluctantly asked what was the matter. Crying, she says, "I'm on my way to North Carolina because my mom died and my dad is alone. I'm trying to move us there." Her car broke down, and she had no way of fixing it and barely enough money for gas to get there. So she was stuck. So I asked them what they liked from McDonald's. The kids were excited to tell me their order. Mom hesitated. This was a truck stop full of truckers, so I, like an idiot, said loudly, "Excuse me, are there any mechanics in the house?" Then I explained about the young mom and her kids. A couple of gentlemen followed me to her car. I gave them their food, and while they ate, we looked at her car. It was a fuel sensor, the guy said. 30 minutes later, at no cost to her, she was on her way, but right as I was getting in my car, her youngest girl, who hadn't said a word the whole time, walked over to me and stuck her little hand out. I took her hand, and she said, "You will make a good dad." Then this feeling came over me, and I just sat there in my car weeping like a child. Weeks go by, and one night I'm on another trip, and my wife calls me, barely able to talk, "I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant, my love." I'm weeping typing this out, and my boys are 7 and 8 now. I know it wasn't a coincidence. There's an obvious explanation to all of this, but I think it's an interesting story. The first time I ended up in the psychiatric ward, there was a woman there, let's call her June, who claimed she talked to God and was also married to Satan as a test. My friend, her, and I would have these really deep conversations, and she always had this really calming presence about her. When I was tweaking out, which was fairly often, she would be able to calm me down really quickly. Anyways, she started telling everyone in the unit that October 14th at 9:41 p.m. was going to be the day and time the apocalypse happened because it was her 13th anniversary with her husband, the devil, and that demons would come to earth and possess people to spark apocalyptic events, or something along those lines. My memory wasn't great during this time. Whenever she talked about this, I felt this really weird surge of energy and would get really hyper, same with my friend. It kind of felt like the 3 of us were on a totally different level from everyone else in the ward. I'm completely atheistic, and I fully believed everything she was saying as well. Anyway, October 14th rolls around, and there's this super bad energy in the air the entire day. There were 2 altercations between patients and nurses in the morning before I even woke up, and I usually woke up at 7 when the first smoke break was because I liked going outside. The second one was so bad they had to lock the doors between the 2 halves of the unit because everyone was so riled up. There were 2 more fights before breakfast in a span of like 40 minutes. When we ate, June insisted that we had to eat with her because it would be our last meals on Earth, and for some reason, all the food that day was really good. Most psychiatric ward food is super bland, and I actually finished my meals for the first time during my stay there. The whole day there was just terrible energy in the air, and they cancelled one of our therapy sessions because the therapist couldn't make it to work that day. So anyway, the evening rolls around, and almost right at 9:41, my friend had a seizure. June kept trying to get into her room while it was happening, and I think she succeeded at one point, but I'm not entirely sure because they locked the doors again, and I was on the other side. The next morning, the apocalypse obviously didn't happen, when I talked to my friend, she said she didn't remember anything that happened during that ordeal and she had never had a history of seizures before. June claimed a demon called Gamora tried to possess her and that she successfully exorcised it, so God decided to postpone the apocalypse to a later date. That day, all the bad energy in the air was gone, but I had also started to come down and didn't believe anything June was saying was true anymore. The next day was actually pretty peaceful too. There were no fights, which was super rare because there was a lot of drama there. I think it all was just an insane coincidence, and June telling everyone the apocalypse would happen probably manifested a lot of bad energy. We were all in the ward for various good reasons, but it's an interesting event to think back upon. I was 5 years old, my brother was 3. My family decided to take a day trip to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Dad is a Civil War enthusiast, and he was excited to see a spot there called Devil's Den, where there had been a high number of soldiers killed in that battle, one of the bloodiest in that war. I remember it was August, it was hot and humid that day. I remember walking with my parents up this hill when my parents were approached by this one guy dressed in a full-fledged Union uniform. I think I remember wondering why he was dressed that way when it was so hot. I genuinely thought he was a tour guide because they make the tour guides dress that way, or did when I went then. I don't remember the conversation between him and my parents. I think I just shrugged it off as adult talk. We got up to the top of this hill, a rocky cliff, this is important later, where he was pointing out stuff to my parents, but mostly my dad. There was only one way off and on this hill, and that was the path we just took. I remember starting to get bored when he pointed something out for my brother and me to look at. I remember walking up to the edge and looking down, seeing nothing. When I turned around to tell him so, he wasn't there. Like, at all. Just vanished. My parents, brother, and I walked all the way down that hill looking for him, but didn't see him. Some things I found out later from my dad when I was older. He greeted my dad by his first name, which spooked him because he'd never seen that guy before in his life. He told my dad he was from a town not far from Gettysburg and pointed out various towns to him on that hill, later found out all those towns were destroyed in the Civil War. The park didn't make any tour guides wear the uniforms because it was too hot that day. Dad said he even noticed the guy wasn't sweating. I used to live in a very old house in the hills of western Maryland. It only had windows in the front and back of the house, not on the sides, and when I asked, it was explained that houses were built this way back then so the slaves walking between the houses couldn't look in. We were renting from a friend of the family who owned the place, and before we moved in, we were warned that the house was special, and that we should be prepared for that, though no explanation was given as to what special meant. I came to find out that the house was, I won't say haunted, more like enchanted. Weird things happened there a lot. The weirdest by far happened a couple of months before I moved away. Across the street was an open field that quickly turned into foothills and maybe 300 yards further on became a tall ridge of mountain. There was some kind of antenna on top of the ridge, and it had a light that was always on at night. No blinking, just a steady white light all the time. One evening I went out to use the bathroom, yeah, it had an outhouse, and happened to notice that the light on the ridge was off. I walked down the driveway a bit because I thought maybe there was a tree blocking it from this angle or something, but I was stopped dead in my tracks. Suddenly the entire sky behind the ridge lit up. It was like someone had turned on extremely bright floodlights and they were reflecting off of snow to an overcast sky or something, but there was no snow on the ground and it was not even slightly overcast. It was eerily quiet, even more than normal. Well, now I was really damned curious, so I continued walking down the driveway to see if I could get a better angle on it, only to see a guy come around the curve of the street from the left and approach me in a quick walk. This is a fairly remote neighborhood. There are 2 other inhabited houses on the street. We hardly ever see traffic, much less foot traffic, so this was unexpected. As he got close enough, he said, "You don't want to go over there," in a cautioning tone. Well, it's not like I was going to climb the mountain in the dark, but, "Why, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep it conversational. "Couldn't say," he said, "but you don't want to be a part of it." "Well, if you don't know what's going on, how do you know I don't want to be part of it?" I asked. "That's pretty weird." I gestured in the direction of the ridge and noticed the light was fluctuating a bit, like a slow pulsing. "No, that's weird as hell, and I'm a curious person." The guy then shifted to a darker, more ominous tone and said, "Your eyes are not meant to see." The way he said it made me think, "You're meant human," and in retrospect, it was definitely a warning, maybe even a threat, and it almost sounded like a kind of ritual pronouncement. But I was oblivious in the moment. I looked back up to the light and said, "Well, I can see it just fine, what's the problem?" But when I looked back down, the guy was gone. In the space of maybe 5 seconds I was looking away, he had disappeared. There's no direction he could have gone, no matter how fast he was running, that he could have gotten out of line of sight in that amount of time. I was already kind of freaked out by the weird lights, but this really pegged my freak out meter. I went back inside and explained to my roommate what had just happened, encouraged him to come out and see for himself, but by the time we got back outside, whatever was going on behind that ridge was over. I figured that guy was just off his rocker and there must have been something entirely normal going on over there, so I went online and looked at Google Maps for the area. There was nothing on the other side of that ridge, no roads, no buildings, no signs of civilization whatsoever, just a blank spot on the map. I switched to satellite view and saw nothing but more wooded ridgelines behind it. To this day, I have no idea what the hell was going on or why I was warned away from it, but it feels like I had been sent some kind of messenger to keep me from blundering into something terrible. I grew up poor, which meant we had a crappy car and could never afford a better one or to get it fixed right. It had an issue with alignment that left us with a worn tire constantly. One day, of course, something in the road hit it just right, and it sprung a leak just as my mom was picking us up from school. We drove to the gas station just barely up the road from the school, and my mom sent me in for a can of Fix-A-Flat. I went in, I was the only one in the store. By virtue of how the store was laid out, you could see the whole thing from the only door in the place. No public restroom. Only one clerk behind the counter, bells on the door. I was the only person in there, I swear. I was getting the Fix-A-Flat when I suddenly heard a guy say, "Got a flat tire?" I looked up, and there was a guy in front of me in a mechanic's uniform. There was no way he could have come in without me hearing and seeing him. Being socially nervous, an awkward teenager, and thoroughly freaked out, I just nodded. He told me to have my mom pull around back to the air pump. He would meet us there with his truck. I never mentioned my mom, by the way, but I didn't realize that until after the fact. I did as instructed. Lo and behold, the guy was a tire man, with a truck full of just the supplies we needed. He patched up our tire for us, paid for the air to fill it up, then refused my mom's attempts to pay him. He got back in his truck and took off in the same direction we needed to go in order to get home. My mom hurried after him to try and catch his truck number so she could tell his boss what a great person he was, but we came around the curve in the road, and there was nothing there. He vanished. There were no turnoffs, no side roads, just a long straight stretch of road that there's no way he could have traversed in the time since we last saw him. We were right behind him. He went around the curve, then he was just gone. Later that night, we looked up the name of the company that had been on his truck. It didn't exist. We knew the town that was listed on the truck under the company name, too, so next time we were up there, we asked around about it. Nobody had ever heard of the place. For small southern towns, that's insane. I have no idea what that guy was, but we never had another issue with that tire again. I mean ever. It somehow outlasted the other three. Benevolent supernatural car man, whoever and wherever you are, thank you. I used to work at a Ben & Jerry's a few years ago. I had an opening shift and usually things are slow up until around 3 when the nearby high school rings the last bell of the day. This was maybe an hour into my shift, and I had already cleaned out one dip case, had a fresh batch of waffle cones, and was getting things done, but with a really bad limp. Quick backstory, growing up I was pretty athletic. T-ball, volleyball, softball, martial arts, dance. So, being an athlete, plus breaking 9 bones, 3 concussions, and dislocating my knee 3 times, yeah, I know, obviously took a toll on my body. I'm 26 but have the bones and joints of a 60-year-old. Anyway, that particular day, since I had woken up, my knee was really bothering me. I even took my brace to work. Being the only one on shift, and having to walk back and forth so much honestly wasn't helping. Then a group of maybe 4 people walked near the entrance of the shop. They looked maybe mid-20s/early 30s, it was 2 guys and 2 girls. Just the girls walked into the shop. I don't remember their order anymore, but when I handed the scoop of ice cream to the second friend I was ringing up, I told her to have a nice day and turned to walk back to my task. I tried hiding my limp the whole time, just because I didn't want to be hopping around while ringing them up. Then she called me over and said it seemed like I was in pain. I downplayed it and said it was nothing, but it was like she knew how much pain I was in. She had a heavy accent, I couldn't make out from where, but I understood that she and her friends liked to travel, then asked if it was okay to hold my hand and say a prayer. I thought it was a bit strange, but she just made me feel so comfortable with her, I couldn't say no. She held my hand and in mid-prayer I swear I felt the pain literally lift off of my knee. It was amazing. I asked her name and she gave it to me, and now for the life of me I cannot remember it. I think it started with an M but I don't know. This was like in 2015 to 2017. But since that day, my knee has never bothered me again. I'll never forget her. Moved into a new apartment complex last year, and I am positive one of our neighboring couples are aliens. Both seem to be in their 40s. The husband is nice, but it seems very fake nice, not like snobby or anything but genuinely trying to put on a show. When I say hi to him, he always slowly raises his hand, stares, and then after a few moments gives me a very weird hi there. He is also constantly working outside of his garage area on man stuff, but none of his projects or purchases ever see the light of day. It is like it is all a show. The wife is even more bizarre. Unlike her husband, anytime I say hi to her, she stares at me and kind of follows me with her eyes and does not say anything. She will stand in the apartment entrance, and if I pull my car in, she just stares and does not move until my car is weirdly close to her. The wife's weirdest trait. I have never seen her wear shoes, but I have never seen her feet. She wears socks all year. I have on 2 occasions caught her outside in the pouring rain doing things with only socks on her feet, takes walks with socks, plays with her kids in only socks. Everything this couple does seems like stuff straight out of a Men in Black movie. I was in the Kroger parking lot loading groceries in the back of my car when I heard a voice behind me say, "I miss my mother." I turned around, and there was a woman standing there. She just looked odd. I couldn't tell if she was old or young. Her hair was in a bob with bangs. She was wearing a yellow sweater with mismatched stitching. It was almost as if a child drew a picture of a woman and it came to life. "Excuse me," I said. "My mother died." "I miss her," the woman replied. "I'm so sorry," I said. She then asked if I could give her some money. I told her yes and gave her a couple of bucks from my wallet. She said thank you as I was putting a bag in my car. I said, "You're welcome," as I turned back to her, and she was gone. I looked all around, and there was no sign of her. In less than 2 seconds, she had completely vanished. There's this one guy in my town who walks around a lot, to the point of being somewhat of a local icon, with people taking pictures of him. He's a man shrouded in mystery. He is tall and lanky, with tan skin, dark John Lennon-style glasses, a gray ponytail, and always wearing very old, worn-out khakis, and a polo topped with a beige jacket. Almost nothing about him can be deciphered. His age is extremely ambiguous, and he's looked the same for a long time. His ethnicity is very hard to figure out, and the closest thing I can say is that he looks vaguely Native American, but even that's a stretch. His home address is unknown as he can be seen walking all over the town. And most importantly, nobody knows his name. He definitely has some mental conditions, though. Sometimes when he walked, he would suddenly pause at random intervals and look around for no reason. One time when I passed him up close, he was muttering something under his breath to himself. He also walked in a way that put weight on one side of his body. I sometimes like to think that he's a non-human creature in the form of a human. This is a story of my dad's from a few years ago. I don't really remember all the details, but I'll try to think of everything I can. So basically, there's a small convenience store in our town that my dad frequents. One day, there was a new cashier, and as my dad was leaving, the cashier asked him, "No trail mix today?" It was weird because my dad had never really liked trail mix. The same thing happened with the same dude a different time, but after that, my dad never saw that cashier again and forgot about it. A few months later, my dad started buying trail mix from the convenience store to take to work for lunch. After about a year and a half or so, my dad was getting kind of sick of trail mix, so he decided not to buy it. Then one of the cashiers asked him, "No trail mix today," and he remembered everything with the weird cashier. He still shares that story with friends to this day and is creeped out by it. I was walking through a cemetery, as usual, and met a man I knew. We were about 100 feet from his family burial plot. I noticed he was rather quiet and down, which was unusual, almost like he was depressed. He was dressed well, in a suit, which had fallen out of favor some time before. In fact, you rarely saw a suit unless it was on a lawyer or federal agent. But, he was older, so it could be normal. The thing was, the next day I heard he had died the day before. From all accounts, he died about the same time I met him in the cemetery. Today, I think they are called crisis apparitions. We just called them ghosts. I should mention, this is not the first time something like this has happened. Every home I have been in has been said to be haunted. I have never had a bad encounter with a spirit, like they show in the movies. In my home, things always move about, disappear, or whatever. It used to scare my wife to death. She may have since taken up residence here that way too. Then, our homes often took the place of funeral parlors/homes, and we had services here. So, like hospitals and other places of death, haunting might be normal. Growing up with them, I treat them like the living. I am told some of this is because of blood. Something about being Indian, Native American, supposedly makes me more sensitive to this. When I was in college, I was walking to class and noticed a very attractive white woman walking toward me. At first, I did not pay much attention to her. Most of the women at the college were attractive. The odd thing was she was wearing all white. It was only once we got close, within 10 feet, that I really noticed something about her. Her dress was transparent. She had no underwear on at all. For all purposes, she was nude. She was also barefoot. I tried as best I could to speak to her without showing discomfort. When I passed, I wondered why she, or anyone, would have been dressed that way, in public, in the middle of the day. No clubs around or anything. At night, I could have put it off to a dance or something. But, the college was almost deserted due to the semester. This also made it hard to ask if anyone had seen her. What got me, though, was when I finally had the nerve to turn around for a second look. I expected to see her walking toward a vehicle. At worst, for her to catch me looking at her or for her to be looking at me. Instead, nothing. She was gone. There were no trees or bushes to hide behind, no vehicles to pick her up, nothing. She was a good half football field from the parking lot. No vehicles had moved and no one was in them. Even if she had run to them, I would have seen her because no more than a minute could have passed. Later, I would learn that a young nurse had died at the campus and was said to haunt the building where the nursing classes were held. However, I doubt she would have attended classes dressed like that, especially when she was supposed to have gone there. Even after the 1960s, dressing like that was taboo in school. You would be thrown off campus. Discussing this with a few occult-minded friends, they came up with some suggestions. One was an angel, which would fit Sans wings. A goddess might work, since she was perfect. Not a blemish on her. No rings or jewelry. No makeup. Her body mass index was perfect, and she had the perfect figure. To say she could have been a model is an understatement. I have never seen a woman like that. She also did not possess the normal defects of people today. She seemed to have never worn shoes. Her body was perfectly tan, no lines of any kind. This would imply that she never wore anything that covered her body. With most of us, there are tan lines where we are exposed to the sun. Instead, she was a solid, uniform pigmentation. Her hair and eyes were perfect. Her smile was too. Another option was a hallucination, caused by the sun. I do not use alcohol, did not use drugs, or anything like that. I cannot even say it was the fantasy of a young man, or even an old man. To this day, I am at a loss, but she is one of my favorite memories. A muse like no other. This is a story from a friend, about his father. He was walking home from work at night when he came to a corner he had to turn. Normally, there was a streetlight above the corner, but for whatever reason, it was turned off, meaning he couldn't see around the corner like usual. A man wearing all white clothes, a suit with a tie, came up to him from behind and asked if he could go with him. My friend's dad was a nice guy and just felt good about the man, so he said yes. He said they turned the corner, and bam, completely blind. He felt the man grab his arm and silently escort him through the darkness. He said it felt like forever, but was likely only a block or so. The man walked the rest of the way home with him, and once my friend's dad went inside, the man was gone. My friend's dad still believes that corner was some kind of portal to hell that night, or some other sketchy place, and that the man was an angel guiding him through. I was out at a college dive bar on a Friday night. This place would get crowded, and I was an avid pool player. People knew me at parties and stuff because I'd always go out to play pool almost every weekend. I'd get money, free drinks, and free beers for winning. I'd run the table. Sometimes I'd grab a random partner to do twos. Me and a random person versus 2 other drunk frat kids or something of the sort. Anyway, this one spring night the place was packed with a bunch of younger, 21 to 24-year-old kids, including myself, at this college dive bar. I was trying to find a partner to play with. In walks a man dressed in a tuxedo, way out of the norm for this place, well-groomed white hair, dress shoes, and looking like he was in his late 70s. I felt like I was playing pool that night with God. This guy did not miss a shot, and he was on my team. We played people at the bar until close, and kids were dropping money on the table trying to bet against us thinking we'd lose at some point. But no. This tuxedo man and I won every game. I never saw him at the spot again. It was the one and only time. 5 years ago, I met Odin. No, seriously, there is just no better explanation. I work in a paper mill, in the purchasing department. I was sent to Sweden to buy some specialized reel writing lathes and other equipment from a mill in Grixbo. 2 engineers and I arrived at the gate, but the guys there were very busy. We loitered a bit, and after a while, they sent their junior machinist to deal with us. Out comes a guy whom you would not accuse of looking like a professional machinist. Tall but skinny, long hair, scraggy beard, and a goddamn eye patch. He had this strange life-worn face that could be 25 or 55 years old. Add to that a hippie linen shirt and some torn jeans. If not for the hard hat and a tool belt, he would look like a malnourished pirate turned hippie. He greeted us in accented, overly polite, and formal English. He kind of sounded like he was mocking us, using over-the-top antiquated polite language. He referred to us as kind sirs, etc. We thought the purchase would fall through because the Swedes clearly did not care about us and sent a junkie to deal with us, but the guy turned out to be 100% professional, if extremely strange. Finally, under Eyepatch Guy's supervision, the forklift operators loaded up the pumps and hatches we were to buy and started to palletize them, securing them with belts, etc. We finished the formalities and headed up to see it all loaded on a truck. Then, a mistake happened. One of the forklift guys screwed up and hit a pallet with another. A heavy industrial pump slid off the pallet and almost fell off the ramp. The warehouse guys panicked and pulled at it to align it back, to no avail. Our Swedish Cotton Eye Joe casually pushed past them, grabbed the edge of the pump, which is like 350 kilograms, and with an effortless tug, pulled it back on the pallet. The guy weighed as much as a wet mop, and his bicep was thinner than my finger, yet he effortlessly pulled more weight than strongman competitors manage. We stared in disbelief, and the Swedes laughed. Apparently, he does that kind of thing all the time to amuse them. We packed up and left. A year later, we visited Grixbo again, but the guy no longer worked there. Apparently, one day he just quit and left. Nobody knows what happened to him. Despite being friends with him for a few years, the other Swedes knew nothing about him, about his family, history, where he lived, whatever. To make it stranger, the guy did not even drive, so as far as they know, he must have just quit the job and hiked all the way to wherever he went. A while after that, I read American Gods, and it kind of clicked. If there are pagan gods among us, he was definitely one. I'm deaf in my left ear. I stopped at Walmart one morning, the sun wasn't up, and I wasn't paying attention. What sounded like a gust of wind entered my left ear, and it felt like it opened. A voice very desperately said into my ear, "Turn around." I turned around, and there was a man following me at arm's length. When I saw him, he began stammering and falling all over himself. He finally sputtered out, "Do you have a cigarette?" I didn't say anything as I was totally shocked. Without explanation, he turned and ran away. I didn't see an entity, it spoke to me. My friend and I were waiting in line at a boba tea place in early 2019. It was crowded, and a guy walked in with a full-sized shopping cart from the grocery store around the block. In the cart were several largish pre-packed party trays. Cheese and crackers, crudité, things like that. The guy himself seemed totally normal. He was youngish, maybe 30, dressed casually but well, and he sort of gave the "what's up" head nod to the cashier and they acknowledged him in a similar way. I assumed they recognized him. I had never seen anyone with a cart full of party snacks just out and about, but I thought maybe he was delivering or picking up on foot for GoPuff or Postmates or something. After I looked away, he sort of backed up into me a bit, and I went, "Oh, I'm sorry," and stepped out of his way. He looked me in the eye, smiled, and in the most genuinely reassuring voice I've ever heard, he said, "Honey, don't worry about other people, think about yourself. You don't need to apologize all the time." My friend turned around and kind of jokingly goes, "Girl, he must know you," referring to my habit of instantly reacting to any situation like this with an apology, and he smiled at her and cheerfully said, "I do." He waited in line next to me, close to me but not really by choice. His cart took up most of the space not occupied by other customers, and he didn't say anything else. I assumed this odd interaction was over. I got zero weirdo vibes from him, which is weird, since I almost always have some discomfort from any strange man standing that close to me. But even though we were practically touching, he didn't loom, didn't seem to want to invade my space intentionally, but also didn't seem to mind having no personal space for himself. It was like he was just casually and comfortably standing next to an old friend, and I felt uncharacteristically at ease. As my friend reached the counter and began to place her order, the man stepped out and away to my side. I instinctively turned toward him. He then pushed his cart away a little bit and in one fluid motion got down on his hands, did a push-up, kissed my foot, and jumped up. Like he did one single burpee. When he stood back up, he smiled this really friendly smile and said calmly and cheerfully, "I love you." He looked over at the cashier, said it again the exact same way, and stepped back toward his cart. I turned toward the counter, very confused. My friend turned around just then after placing her order and looked behind me and said, "Where did the cart guy go?" He was gone. His cart, got out of a crowded boba shop in 5 seconds flat. He was not visible outside through a wall of windows either. This was impossible. My friend later asked why he was saying, "I love you." That was all she had experienced of that situation. I told her what had happened while she was placing her order, and she was shocked. She almost didn't believe me, but the couple next to us waiting for their order confirmed my story to her, and me, to be honest. The many people behind us in line seemed extremely confused, the cashier seemed to only mildly react and took my order unfazed like this was a normal occurrence. Though having worked food service, this part was not all that surprising. This tea shop is literally attached to my apartment building. I go there a lot. I have never seen this man before or since. What weirds me out most is that this guy did not at any point give me any kind of creepy vibe at all. I am very anxious and introverted, and I generally have a pretty good radar for when someone in my proximity is about to do something weird. I do not usually have a neutral emotional reaction to interactions of any kind with strangers, especially strange men being overly familiar with me, but this guy did not register to my intuition as any kind of threat or creep. He kissed my foot in a crowded shop in broad daylight, but he didn't linger on it. There was no indication that it was in any way sexual or even vaguely inappropriate for him. Like there was nothing in it for him, it was just a thing he did as if it was perfectly natural and friendly. It was carried out like a polite handshake in the space of a few seconds. He just walked in, bumped into me, read a major personality flaw from an offhanded apology, waited in line with me for absolutely nothing, delivered absolutely nothing from his cart, kissed my foot like I was some weird boba queen, professed his love to me and the cashier, and vanished without a trace. Who was that guy? Why was his bizarrely nurturing and familiar energy and socially inappropriate behavior not extremely alarming to me? How did he know I apologize all the time? What the F? This actually happened recently. A dude was on the side of the road fiddling with his bike, and I could see the chain had jumped off the gears. I know a decent bit of bike maintenance, and recently I had been feeling guilty for passing people stranded on the road. So I stopped. The dude was clearly on some uppers and not totally in a good state of mind, but very polite and thankful as I examined the situation. I saw it wasn't a simple chain off as the chain was all twisted in the wheel. I needed a few tools. Fine, my place was down the block. We started walking there, and this guy was just tweak talking. Anybody familiar with uppers knows the random, rambling, high energy I'm talking about. But the subject matter was heavy. His wife was in jail right now, and he was worried about taking care of his hearing-impaired daughter, but he was thankful they just got state-of-the-art hearing devices and I could watch the video on YouTube. He was checking himself into rehab next week because he hadn't been able to hold his plumbing jobs down with his drug use, etc. It was this type of rambling continuous as I dissected his bike. At some point, I commented on how nice the bike was. It was an old-school mountain bike with baller components. Carbon fiber everything, super expensive shocks. Frankly, I assumed it was stolen and everything he was saying was a nervous, tweaked lie. He claimed the bike was his wife's and she used to be a pro racer in the early 2000s. I continued to figure it was a cover story, but noted the timeline and age of the bike did line up. Anyway, I got it fixed and wished him well. He rode off into the sunset, and I immediately went inside to look up his name. I found him on Facebook, and everything he said was true. I found the video of his daughter getting implants and could see a much healthier version of himself in the frame. I found out he had been a plumber for years, and up until very recently, all his pics were of him clearly not tweaked on uppers. I found his wife, who recently got a DUI and was in jail. I found her history and that she did race mountain bikes in the 2000s. I guess he wasn't an alien, but meeting him was sure as hell bizarre and something I'll never forget. I was working in Florida as a manager in a large chain of automotive dealers. I was on the service side and dealt with the customers who had the most difficult issues or were upset. One day, an older man came in and I went for a quick test drive to assess his concerns with the vehicle. He was calm and polite, a very easygoing person. After speaking for a few minutes, he asked me if I liked magic. He then proceeded to start talking about where I was from. He didn't ask a single question, he just began to talk. He narrowed down the area until he was within a 20-minute drive from the hospital I was born in. That hospital is an 18-hour drive from where that dealership was. After a few minutes, he said, "But you didn't live there very long, moved south to the city of censored, right?" He was absolutely spot on. Then he started rubbing his eyes and kinda humming. He asked me how long I had lived in Norway, then narrowed it down to the city I lived in for 8 years. At this point, I'm thinking he's some kind of weirdo who has done a background check on me, but how would he know where I had lived while overseas? He said, "Do you believe in magic now?" On the return drive to the dealership, I was running every possible scenario through my head. Did a friend set me up? How did he know the name of the city in Norway? When we arrived, he leaned over and said, "I'm just having some fun with you. I was in the CIA for years as a linguist. Now that I'm retired, I just use it as a party trick." He had me so confused, he honestly could have said he was some kind of psychic and I wouldn't have been able to argue. Back in 1997, I was 8 years old. I shared a room with my younger brother, who was 4 at the time. We used to have our grandparents over for dinner most nights, and it wasn't uncommon for them to stay long after we had gone to bed. They would come and kiss us goodbye in bed when they were going to leave. One summer day, I woke up during the night and saw my granddad. It wasn't unusual, like I said. I said, "Hi Granddad, are you leaving now?" He came and sat on my bed and said, "Yes, I'm saying goodbye for now." He kissed me and then went and sat on my brother's bed and kissed him as well. Then he left. My childhood intuition picked up that he was a bit sad. The next morning, I went into the kitchen to find my mum crying. She told me that my granddad died last night of a sudden heart attack. I said, "How can that be? I saw him last night, he came and said goodnight to me." My mum said that my grandparents left shortly after I went to bed last night. I also remembered that my grandpa said goodbye and not goodnight. It was quite a shock but at the same time a little comforting too. I don't remember a lot from my childhood, but this is a memory that I won't forget. One evening in winter, I didn't leave work until almost 7 p.m., so I was walking home and thought, forget it, I'll cut through the park to get home quicker, even though it's really poorly lit. A couple of minutes into the park, I could hear a group of people behind me and in front of me and was thinking, I'm going to be jumped. Up ahead, there was a lamp post with a CCTV camera on it, so I thought I'd stop there and at least I'd get jumped on camera. As I stood beneath this light, this really tall woman jogged over and stopped next to me. I'm 6 feet tall, and she was way taller than me. She asked me, "Is it okay if I walk with you?" And I was like, "Sure, okay, I guess." She walked with me to the edge of the park, talking about how dodgy the park was at night. As soon as we got to the edge of the park, she told me to have a good night, then jogged back into the park. It was a really weird experience. I felt certain I would have been mugged or something if she wasn't there. I walked through that park every day for about a year and never saw her again. I live in a small town with very few black people around, Central Europe. I was pretty down because of a girl and went for kebab. While I was standing in a queue for kebab, in the pub right next to it, there was a woman that caught my attention because of two things. Initially because of her race, which is uncommon to see there, and also the fact that I had never seen her before, despite living in this small town my entire life and going around this pub every day. Another thing I noticed was that she didn't order anything, she just sat there by the table alone. Then I ordered my food, and while waiting for it, the woman leaned over the fence that separates the kebab place from the pub, looked directly at me, and offered me an ice cream. I accepted the offer, and immediately after that, she looked me in the eyes, smiled a bit, and clearly, calmly said, "I love you." Then, as I received my kebab, I turned around to where she was, and she was gone. Vanished as quickly as she appeared. I inspected the ice cream, and it seemed okay and the package was intact. It was delicious.